Pastor Andy here. Thank you for checking out this resource from Bethel Baptist Church. I hope it challenges you, encourages you, and gives you a yearning for King Jesus. You can get resources like this and more on our church website. If you're in the Bradenton area, we'd love to have you come join us for worship on a Sunday morning to see what God is doing for His glory.
Good morning. As you guys know, my name is Chuck Milkay, and our reading this morning comes from Matthew chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod of the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea." And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and they worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead." And he went and lived in a city called Nazareth. This is the word of the Lord. Bethel kids, you are now dismissed.
All right. Hey, good morning again. If you haven't yet turned your Bible to Matthew chapter 2, go ahead and do that now. And as you get there, let me just say this morning up front. Walking through texts like Matthew 2 can be very dangerous for pastors and Christians altogether. And not because it creates any type of theological problems or doctrinal problems or whatever. We believe Christ is fully God, fully man. But the danger is these passages in Matthew 2 become all too familiar to us. Because if you've grown up in the church for any amount of time and you've gone to church around Christmas for any amount of time, you will know that this text, you're like, this is Christmas, Andy, and we are in September. And I know many of us probably have already started decorating for Christmas, but yes, it is still September. And so with that, look, Matthew 2 is a passage that, again, gets read on Christmas, and because of that, it's a passage that we think that we know that narrative. And so again, that danger then becomes, we don't get what the text is saying, but rather we take all the manger, the star, the shepherds, this wise men imagery, and we shove it into our neat little box for Christmas that we put all the decorations down next to. I'm going to kill this real quick. There we go. All the decorations down next to. And it usually sits right between like the garland and the Santa Claus figurines. And when the season is over, we pack it up again and we go on from there. And so look, not only are we about to mess up your presumption of Christmas, so I'm sorry from the get-go, all right? I'm going to mess with your beloved Christmas carols as well. Is that okay? We go with that? We Three Kings is going out the window today, all right? Here's what I want us to understand first and foremost. Matthew 2 is not a Christmas-only text, okay? Matthew 2 shows us that Jesus is the true king. He was opposed by the world, but protected by God, and he is worshiped by the nations. All right? And so look, here's what we're going to see today, is that Israel was waiting for this Messiah. They're waiting for this conquering king, but the people first to recognize him weren't the Jewish priests. It wasn't the Jewish leaders, but it was pagan astrologers from the east. And so look at this. I know Chuck just read this, but look. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, it says, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who's been born King of the Jews? For we saw the star, and we've come to worship him." And when Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. And assembling the chief priests and scribes, he inquired of them where this Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for it is written as the prophet, as you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who shall shepherd my people Israel. So look, so we have two things right here, straight from the beginning. I love that the fact that Jesus is born in Bethlehem, only for the fact that Jesus in the Gospel of John says, I am the bread of life. And the word Bethlehem translates to the house of bread. All right? And so I just love that already from the get-go, we're seeing this collaboration of what the Old Testament prophecies are saying and who Jesus is proclaiming to be. All right? And so look, it wasn't an accident. The Lord, through the prophet Micah, actually told his people this was going to happen. It wasn't an accident where Mary and Joseph ended up. In verse 6, like I said, just it tells us that prophecy. And here's the thing. The critique then for this, and when you get to passages in here, and you go, well, wait a minute, that's supposed to be from Micah 5, but Micah 5 doesn't line up, because that's not what Micah 5 actually says. And the danger thing is, we have to read what Matthew's actually trying to do, because Matthew, quoting Micah, takes about 5 verses and condenses it into 2 lines. Right? Matthew wasn't trying to force a narrative or force anything else. Matthew did a cut and paste of Micah 5. Look at this on the screen. Micah 5, starting in chapter 5, verse 2, it says this, but you, O Bethlehem Ephrath. That looks familiar, right? Who are too little to be among the clans of Judah. For you shall come forth from me one who is under a ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time where she who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of his brothers shall return to the people of Israel. And he shall stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall dwell secure. For look, now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be their peace. Now, if you know anything about the Gospels, this language, shepherding language, should sound familiar, right? Matthew is constantly tying Jesus back to the line of David. Constantly. And only someone from the clan of Judah could actually claim the throne of David. And so look, remember last week when we talked about Old Testament prophecy, and that usually in the Old Testament, prophecy that was written had a more immediate fulfillment that was ultimately going to lead to a better and full fulfillment in the end, right? And so that is what's going on right here. Because in the context of Micah 5, Micah is actually talking about they're about to be attacked by the Syrians and God's going to raise someone up. But ultimately, we know God does raise someone up, and that is the God-man, Jesus. And so, this ultimate fulfillment points the hearts and the eyes and the lives of Israel to a more permanent fulfillment, which is Jesus the Messiah. So, it is said that the one who will proclaim to be the bread of life will come from the town labeled the house of bread. So here's the second thing, right? The ones who came to worship weren't the people who should have necessarily known. Like, that always blows my mind. I know, like, when we read this, when we sing these carols and we get into here and we go, well, yeah, like, Jesus is here and they saw a star and, like, the wise men were like, I see a star, let's go visit him. It should get us counterintuitive of who actually came to visit. Again, it was a bunch of Eastern astrologists with pagan roots who, by some manner of prophecy, knew that when this specific star appeared, there would be a significant event by way of a new king. And so, I don't want us to miss this. Matthew 2 says, behold, I'm going to paraphrase, behold, right? Here come these magician, sorcerer, pagan sinners, and they have come to worship Jesus. That should sound weird because that's what's happening. And since words matter, what did the Magi see? The text, I love the text. It says, they didn't say they saw a star. What's the text say? They saw his star. Ultimately, one star, not to be confused with anything else. Because sometimes I walk out, how many of you guys do this? Any stargazers? You just love sitting under the stars? Anyone with me there? I'm alone, that's fine. But sometimes I sit there and I go, there's a star up there. Oh, that must be the Big Dipper. And I remember doing this as a kid. My dad's like, Andrew, no. I'm like, no, it is, I promise you. And he's like, no, that's over here. Well, that's Orion's belt. No, it's not. It's over here. I'm like, stop it, right? And the reality is, all I'm saying is it's not just a random star that magically showed up, but the text is clear that says when these pagan sorcerer, astrologist men, kings, whatever, saw his star, they knew something had happened. And so we see this group of magi. They're excited that this king of the Jews is here. And the crazy thing is, and people that are supposed to be looking for the king aren't. Does that ever sit, when you read this text, because we gloss over it so well at Christmas, he was born, the three kings came, and our little nativities have the shepherds with the sheep and the three wise men next to it. We'll get to that. We miss the significance because the people that should have known and anticipated the coming Messiah were so indifferent that they didn't care what was actually happening. It took God bringing men from the east to say, don't you know what just happened? Notice the indifference. The religious leaders would have known the Old Testament prophecies. Why do we know that? Because Herod goes to them and is like, hey, this Messiah of yours, where is he to be born again? And it didn't say, and they consulted for days, and they looked through the scriptures, and they just knew. They're like, yeah, Bethlehem. And when they all have known to be this prophecy, and when they should have known these things starting to come true, they did nothing. The text actually indicates them as being indifferent. And so not only was Herod troubled, but Matthew writes that all of Jerusalem was troubled. You would think that there would be an excitement of this long-awaited Messiah, and he's here, and he's going to take place, and he's ultimately going to redeem us, and he's going to bring us out of the pit, and he's going to put Israel on this map, and we're going to have ruling over these things, and we're going to have power, and we're going to have what? And what was obvious here, and this is a warning for us, it's obvious here that they weren't paying attention, or they didn't believe the prophecy was true, or they hoped it wouldn't be true so that they could live their lives and according to what they wanted to do, all while holding power to themselves. There's no other option. And again, the danger here is that we, as the New Testament church, we read texts like this and we lose the awe of the Lord. When our hearts become indifferent, when we question God's promises, and when they don't happen in a time frame, like, God, you promised me this, but it hasn't happened in my time frame, we deem all these things fake, false, untrue. And here's the thing, we don't lean into Him. We lean into ourselves. We end up leaning into our own sin in our own way. We end up saying, did God really say? And then at that point, we sound curiously like some serpent that was around in Genesis chapter 3. And so they were indifferent to Jesus. And this indifference ultimately is going to lead their hearts to opposition of the king that'll put them on a cross. And yes, it'll be for his purposes, but their indifference in their hardened hearts will lead to a murder of a Messiah. And so here's the point. and I don't want to stretch this too far because I don't want to get hermeneutically crazy. But I think I can make the argument that this is the first time we see that Jesus didn't just come for the Jews, but he came for all nations. It's the first time because his own people are all, like we talk about, though the Jews rejected Jesus and they put him on the cross, the Jews were rejecting Jesus since day one. It wasn't something that just happened. They were already in opposition when he was born. And so don't miss that. Because so much for us, we want the things of God, the promises of God, but yet our hearts are already in opposition to him. And it really doesn't matter what he does, but if it doesn't work out for me, I'm going to question his goodness. I'm going to question his glory. And so that text right there, knowing that his people were already in opposition to him when he was born, and God ultimately saying, I'm going to bring people from the east to this place to show you. This is God already proving that Jesus was for the nations. It's this unspoken hope that Jesus is, in fact, a king for the nations. And here's the thing, it's like not only is Israel troubled by it, it's not just for the religious elite who missed it, but this hope for the nations is for everyone. This is why I love in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus himself says, I have come to seek and save that which was lost. And for some of us, we go, wait a minute, what's lost? And it's because we don't look at the scriptures the way that we're actually intended, because we're trying to read ourselves into this book and ourselves into these promises and ourselves into these things, rather than actually allowing God to mold us into his image. And again, I don't want to read into this, but I think there's some warnings here for us as well. Like, let us not have hearts that know a lot about Jesus, but don't draw near Jesus. This is a danger for us. Is it? That's the danger for us. We get so much teaching, so much head knowledge, so much stuff, but when it comes to the things of God, our hearts are not effectuated by this knowledge, and we end up just going, yeah, I know, but then your heart screams, I want to do my things. And so often, it's just we become too smart for our own good. And I'm not saying education and academic, I'm not saying none of that's bad, but when we do that at the cost of pressing into Jesus, there's the problem. When we see God do amazing things because of who he is, when we see God like radically changing and drawing people into his kingdom, we should rejoice. But yet so often, when we see Jesus doing things, when we see Jesus radically changing hearts, instead of rejoicing, we become the skeptic. Are you really? Have you accepted my 14-point doctoral statement? Have you arrived at my conclusions about this thing? Have you done the things that I proclaim you should do because therefore your pastor? What? Like, we need to look at this and understand, like, when God is on the move, when he does something great, we shouldn't sit idly by going like, well, when God proves it, I'll do something about it. We should go, God, here I am, send me. Should we not? The problem is, we don't like telling God, send me, because we're afraid what's on the other end of that sentence. We don't want to say, God, send me, because we're like, God, send me where I'd like to go. Lead me in the manner of how I want to be led. And so we say, God, send me, and we pray prayers, God, send me, and we're like, but send me like on the west coast of Florida. It's so beautiful. For some of you, send me out of Florida, it's so hot. Like, don't you see what Matthew is saying? I love the beginning of this because Matthew is saying it's not the church kid who grew up knowing the right answers who bows at the feet of Jesus first. It's the pagan sorcerers who came across the desert who knelt at his feet. This gospel that we proclaim breaks the categories, and it tells us and tells me we have an ultimate hope in a redeeming Christ who you're not too far gone, you're not too far away, you're not too far broken, you're not too far down that way. You can be restored and redeemed, and he beckons you to come and kneel at his feet. And when you do that, because I need to say this, when you kneel at the feet of Jesus, so often we want to bring Jesus a picture that we think that he wants to see. The nonsense of that is, one, he already knows. If he's sovereign, which he is, he already knows you're jacked up. All right? The second thing is when we try to clean ourselves up to make us presentable before the Lord, we do the gospel a disservice and we call Jesus a liar because he's saying, come to me and I will make you what I want to make you. Don't come to me bringing me your presuppositions about what you want to be made into. And so we have to let the God mold us and break us to build us back up into his glory. Nobody's too far, too broken. In this text, no one's too pagan for the grace of Jesus. So let's look at this. So we see this. So they come into town. They're like, hey, we're following his star, and we are here now, and what do we do with this? And so they go to Herod, and it says Herod's upset, and the people of Israel are upset, the people of Jerusalem are upset, and they're all getting worked up, and he goes to their scribes and their priests like, where is this supposed to happen? Oh, in Bethlehem. Yeah, we have a prophecy about that. Oh, he's here? Okay. And it says this in verse 7. It says Herod, I'm going to paraphrase. It says Herod summoned the wise men secretly. Danger number one. Summoned the wise men secretly, and he asked them, from how long ago did the star happen? And he sent them to Bethlehem saying, go and search diligently for the child. And when you find him, come back so that I may worship him too. Liar. Side note, anytime that someone tells you in secret, go and find this so that when you do, I might come and be with you. Wrong. Every movie tells you, you will end up dead and they will take the thing from you. You're laughing because you know I'm true, all right? And so we see this. And so they listened to the king and they went on their way and they waited around and the star appeared again and they were excited. I love that it says they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy that they saw the star again. They're like, this is true. And so they went and into the house. They saw Mary and Joseph and they fell down and worshiped him. They opened the things that they had brought, the treasures, and they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And now look at this. The response from Herod kind of makes you take a breath. So how long ago did this actually happen? And again, like I said, it's that already that wicked setup from the start. Herod was already plotting at verse 7. So often we're like, well, when they found him and then he realized who he was, verse 13, Herod plotted against him. Herod was, look, I say verse 7. Realistically, Herod was probably plotting the moment that he heard there was another king born within 6 miles of Jerusalem. In that moment, the wickedness of the heart probably kicked in a little bit. It's just like he was plotting already. And the thing is like, what did Herod know? Obviously, if he's talking to the Jewish elite and the priests, he's obviously knowing something. The question is, what did he know? Like, did he know that there was a prophecy of an eternal king that was coming to reign as the Messiah? And for them, even the Jews thought it was just going to be a Messiah for the Jews, not for the nations. Like, did he hear the prophecy from these Jewish leaders and that he reigned over? Like, is he playing catch up when he hears this news? Like, what? God, priest, what? Oh, yeah, there's a prophecy about a king. Time out. This needs to be a guy in the know, right? But look, as they were in Jerusalem, again, like I love this. This is the Magi. They see the star, and they follow him 6 miles south to Bethlehem. And again, I can't get over that, right? That these pagan astronomers who are not a part of this Jewish lineage are the ones that are, their hearts are the ones that are stirred. Their hearts are the ones that are joy, have joy with exceeding joy is what the text says. I love it. I love that Matthew adds this in the narrative. Matthew did not have to add that in the narrative. Had you removed that part of the narrative wouldn't change. But he's bringing this to light of the reality of what the coming of Jesus should do to our souls. And so he says, verse 11, he says, they go into the house. Right there, full stop. This is where we're going to blow up your nativity scene, all right? Everyone's nativity scene, you have Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Some of us have a little manger thing above them. You have little, most of them are wood, right? The little cutouts of the shepherds, cutouts of little animals, and all of us, we have three kings kneeling before the Lord. You have my permission to go home and make kindling out of the three kings on your nativity. Why? Because they did not come to an infant baby Jesus. They came, it says, into the house. It says not to the manger, not to the place that he was. It says into the house where Mary and Joseph and this Christ child were. So realistically, there was a good chance Jesus, again, wasn't a newborn when the Magi arrived, but probably, depending on who you read, somewhere between 6 months and just under 2 years old. And also notice, again, I don't use the term three kings. I use the Magi because, again, there's good evidence that, in fact, there were more than three Magi. Because historically, this is where we bring in history, historically, the Magi traveled in caravans. They traveled with many of them, with their wives, with their children, with their things. And so they just didn't, it wasn't like three dudes going across the desert being like, well, what you want to do when we get there? It's this caravan of up to 40 to 50 people coming in. So when we, again, with that understood, when you go back and read when these guys showed up, all of Jerusalem was stirred up because it wasn't three guys in the dead of night where they walk in and be like, hey, king, where's this guy at? Where's this Christ child? It's 40 foreigners that show up to town and are like, hey, we're here to stay for a little bit. What? And so again, it's not just these three men on camels coming to Herod to inquire. It's a caravan of non-Jewish travelers seeking out his star that's tied to a prophecy of a reigning king for the Jews who Herod is over. And so, Andy, where do we get three? Because there's three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And look, some have even speculated that these different gifts, they hold meaning, right? The gold means he is royal, and the frankincense represents priestly nature, and the myrrh represents a spice, an embalming spice for after death. Is that true? I don't know. I've read 4 different commentaries, and the gold meant something else to each one of them. The myrrh meant something else. The frankincense meant something else. So I'm not going to pontificate on that, but what we need to know is that there's 2 things that tell us about these gifts. They indicate the gravity of the reality that they're in. These things were, all we can tell you, these were expensive things. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh were not dollar store, dime store, side store items you could just go and pick up. They had to be procured and preserved, and they were expensive. Which already tells us, when we use the term put your money where your mouth is, these kings coming across from the east with these gifts, and they're laying them before this Christ child, which is saying from their heart, we are holding fast that you are the king. These, in fact, just alone bringing gifts in and of themselves indicates that he's worthy of being a king. The second is that it seems that Matthew, again, Old Testament points to New Testament. Old Testament proves Christ. In adding that they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh, it seems that they are tying this from a prophetic moment in Isaiah 60. This is on the screen too. Isaiah 60, 3 through 6 says this, and the nations from the far east, the people from the nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from afar, and your daughters shall be carried on the hip. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and exult, because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. Watch this, verse 6. A multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah, and those from Sheba shall come. Look at this. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord. Matthew is constantly, again, proving that this Christ child is in fact the coming Messiah, and he's tying it back to the prophecies that were told, that were memorized, that should have been known into the hearts of these priests. And they are blind to it. So, whether or not the Magi knew the prophecy, God was still using them in this moment to prove the truth. And then what's it say? They snuck out of town. They left. They had a vision or a dream that said, do not go back through Jerusalem, because we know that Herod will want to kill this child. And so they took their caravan and they headed out. They honored the king and they left him. And you're like, well, if that was Jesus, why did they leave him? Because Herod was hunting him, and leaving no trace of evidence where he was a safety care for this Christ child. And so look, because they left without saying goodbye and leaving Herod not knowing where to worship, it says this: Herod was distraught, and he sent out another group to go find Jesus because he wanted to worship him. Right? No. What was that? No. What's it say? It says, when they departed, verse 13, it says, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, look, take this child and their mother and flee. And flee to Egypt and remain there until I tell you, because Herod is searching for the child, not to worship him, but to put an end to him. And Joseph rose in obedience and took the child and the mother by night, which means left everything behind outside of what they could carry. I know for some of us, if we got that warning, flee today to Georgia because your life is being hunted, you would go, I got to order you all, hang on. Right? Would we not? We'd be loading everything we have into our car. Then we go rent a trailer because we can't leave anything behind. It says they left pretty much departing at night to Egypt with nothing, and they remained there until the death of Herod. And it says this: it was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken to the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. And so look, here's what we see in verses 16 through 18, that Herod became so enraged that he actually sent out a delegation to kill every child under the age of 2 in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, and the surrounding areas. It's no longer the Jews who might be thinking this is the Messiah, but now people from the other side of the known world, again, they're starting to show up. And Herod knows this announcement of another king would signify the end of Herod's rule. And so he sends out people to hunt down anyone. And we look at that and it's shocking because we go, who would do that? Herod would do that. All right? This response out of character, I love going back into antiquity and history, right? This response isn't out of character for Herod. Historically, Herod is said to have had his brother-in-law drown because he was getting more popular with charisma than Herod was. And he was afraid that he was going to take over the throne, and so he had him drown. We also see that he had 2 of his sons strangled because he feared that they were plotting against him. Herod was the guy that if you said anything other than, yes, my lord, he would kill you. Getting rid of any opposition. And look, Herod responds to this moment with fear and with violence. He doesn't want to lose control. And here's where we sit in our little ivory towers, and we look at this text and we go, oh my, how wicked. But is that not humanity's default position? The moment something tries to dethrone us in something that we feel that we should conquer or be over, we're not humble. We take up the fight. No one will take me. We don't want to surrender who we are and all we have to another. I mean, this is why David writes in Psalms 2, the kings of the earth set themselves against the Lord and against his anointed. It's no fathoming thought that this was going to be the result. And so for us, this can quickly become our own posture where we refuse to bow at the feet of Jesus and we actually end up standing in opposition to him. And I know no one wants to admit that. No one wants to say that about our own hearts, but it's true. And that's why we have to die to ourselves daily, die to our own thoughts and our own opinions and our own selves daily, so that Christ would rule supreme in us. And so the crazy thing is, we don't think we do this, but look, when we choose our own way, when we choose our own desires, like when we pursue gossip over truth, when we pursue flesh over spirit, when we pursue a preference over regard for others, like when we do that, we're actually a better picture of Herod than we are of Jesus. And so Matthew wants to make sure that we are understanding that Jesus is, in fact, the long-awaited Messiah. And it's the reason why he keeps drawing his Jewish audience back to these Old Testament prophecies. It's why he quotes Micah. It's why he quotes Isaiah. It's why he quotes all of these Old Testament prophecies. When we see in verse 15 where he says, the Lord, it was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet Hosea, out of Egypt I shall call my son. And he ties it to the words of Jeremiah, to the weeping of the children, right? Like Matthew quoting Hosea is to remind us that there is a picture of Jesus' Jewish heritage, to remind us that he is, in fact, what we see in Exodus, Jesus is the greater Moses. He is the one who will ultimately free his people, and ultimately the world coming out of Israel, coming out of Egypt. And in that moment, in Exodus, just like God protected Moses from Pharaoh, he also protected Jesus from Herod. We see the Pharaoh killing Israelite children en masse. We see Herod doing the same thing. And as God protected him, God protects Jesus from the hand of Herod, who sought to put an end to the possibility of a new king. And the irony of this is that God freed Israel from Egypt, but yet he puts Jesus back to Egypt. And it's in those moments where it seems like everything can be over in an instant that we can know that even though the kingdom of darkness reigns and rages, God and his purposes still are standing. And I want us to take that to heart, even as we're following Christ in 2025. The headlines are a mess. Our hearts and our souls are heavy and they weep. The world is raging, our country in chaos, the world in chaos. Here's the look at bringing this back to the text, like looking at this, like you think Herod's going to outmaneuver the God of the universe? Like, there's no chance. And here's the thing, bring this full circle. Like, it's the same and true for you and for your life. And so it's like whatever chaos we're in, whatever darkness presses against us, God's not pacing the halls of heaven, like wringing his hands. He's not nervous. He's not biting his nails. God is he rules and he rescues. And so he did it then. He does it now. And so the question is, what do? We hold fast to hope. We cry out to God. We trust in his promises. Look at me. Even when you don't see it. Even when we don't see it, we press in to his character. We press in to his promises. We press into them knowing that he is still with us. As he came in Matthew 1, being proclaimed Emmanuel, God with us, that same Christ was resurrected and now sits at the right hand of the Father, and he is still with us. How? Because if you are a believer in Jesus, you have his Spirit indwelling within you, and he is with you. It's the reminder that the Spirit inside of you at times is better than the Jesus beside you. So often we're like, well, I need to go to Jesus and go to Jesus. Yes, but don't forget that we are a people that have God with us always. And I don't want us to miss that. Even when we don't see it, we press in, and we know that he is faithful because he is with us and guiding us and caring for us. He is the one who is encouraging us to keep stepping forward. And look, he's not some ineffectual infant. He's the resurrected king who sits on the throne, and he is for you, and he is with you. And so just as God was faithful to Mary and Joseph, he is still faithful to us today. Like, I think that needs to latch into some of our hearts. It's like God is still faithful. He still desires his people. He still is drawing people to himself. He is still changing hearts, and he is still changing lives. And so we look at this text, verses 19 through 23. It says, after Herod dies, back to Israel we go. It says, when Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream in Egypt, saying, rise, go home. Again, paraphrasing that. He rose and took the child and his mother, and they went back to Israel. But they heard that Herod's son was reigning over Judah in place of Herod, most likely taking up his father's mantle. And so they went to go live in a town called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. Like, do we see all of the Old Testament now beginning to point to Jesus? And look, this is the second time that Joseph had to trust an angel of the Lord that something crazy was going on. The first one, he's about to divorce Mary quietly, and the angel comes and says, Joseph, stop it. And then now they're in Egypt for who knows how long, and an angel appears and says, Joseph, go home. Like, I look at this, though, and like, there's still a bit of apprehension, right? Like, maybe Joseph is afraid, like Herod left his son a note to watch out for this baby when he shows back up, right, claiming to be king. Like, I don't know, but they didn't go back to Bethlehem. They didn't go back to Jerusalem. They went to Nazareth. And so begins the upbringing of Christ in a backwater northern town of Israel. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords grows up in humility and in obscurity. The King of Glory doesn't start in a palace, he starts in poverty. It's the very opposite of what the Jews assumed the Messiah was going to be. And sometimes for us, like, when we approach Jesus, like, in our minds, he's the exact opposite of what we assume him to be. It's the same, like, we look at this. And until his time to be revealed, this God-man lives in obedience to the place where he is. Like, this is one thing that I want us to understand. Like, when God has him in different places, he's not working miracles. He's not doing things. He's not preaching and teaching. He is learning. He's being obedient to the Father where he is. He's being obedient to his heavenly Father. He's being obedient to his adoptive earthly father. And so I know we gloss over that fact sometimes. Like, we forget that Jesus had to be obedient for where he was. We forget that, like, he didn't age from baby to 33 and start, or 30 years old and start ministry overnight, or 33. And so, look, we know that God works through what is humble and what is ordinary and what is even despised. And the exact thing is opposite for us in our Western culture, is it not? We think God can only work with the large, charismatic, boisterous leaders, these star-studded individuals. But again, let us not forget how God works in our lives. He doesn't work in worldly power. He works in weakness and humility, completely countercultural to what we think he does. It creates a dependence on him. It prepares us to die to ourselves. It prepares Jesus ultimately for the cross. So, like, here's the thought. Like, so many of us, like, we want to pray that God would do something big, that we want God to, like, flex his power in your life, but, like, maybe what he's doing is, like, trying to get you to flex some humility. The King of the universe is not ashamed to be called a Nazarene, and he's not ashamed to be with you in your weakness. And in fact, what does the scriptures tell us? In your weakness, what? He is made strong. So, if in fact, in your weakness, God is made strong, why in the world do we constantly try to take the weight from him? Why are we constantly trying to lift the bar on our own power and our own authority? If we really believe that in our weakness, he is made strong, in our humility, he is made great. If we really believe that as believers, then why are we constantly trying to do it on our own? So look, as we wrap this up, Ben, go ahead and start making your way up here. The child in the manger, we have the refugee in Egypt, we have the Nazarene on the cross. Like, that's who your king is, all right? And so in his death is defeated and Christ is raised to life so that we too can be raised to new life, right? The gospel is not a keep lifting the bar. It's come bow to the king who humbled himself to save you. And so Matthew 2 is not just some sweet little Christmas story. It's a clash of kingdoms, all right? The true king has come, and every heart must decide how they will respond to him. And some of us, like the religious elite, will respond with indifference. Some, like Herod, will respond with hostility and fear and violence. But others, like the Magi, we will come and we will bow and we will worship him. And so the gospel declares that this king did not come first with a sword. The people of Israel thought their Messiah would be a warring, conquering, reigning king. And when Jesus begins to ride the colt into and through the gate of Jerusalem, that was not the picture that they had. He did not come to be served. He came to serve, and he came to give his life as a ransom for sinners. So look, as we wrap this Matthew 2, the child worshipped in Bethlehem would one day wear a crown of thorns outside Jerusalem, bearing the punishment that our sin deserves. And he will rise again in victory and offer forgiveness and life to all who would bow their knee to him. So looking deeper at this text, it's not simply just to admire Jesus. It's not simply just to go, oh, that's a beautiful story. it's to worship him. This is a call to come and bow at the feet of Jesus. It's a call and reminder that he is for the nations. It's a call and reminder that God had set this up through prophecy from the beginning of time, and now we get to experience and see this truth. We, church, get to taste and see that the Lord is good. So, not to just acknowledge him as king, but to surrender to him as your king. And so we say, we lay down our pride, we lay down our control, we lay down our sin, and we bow again at the feet of Jesus.